Clock's all wrong, so I don't know what time it is. Well, it was very good that we had... Oh, thank you. That's a good man. Thank you very much. Don't forget to get it back afterwards, because I don't even have a watch. If there's a watch in this place that works for more than 3 days, I'd like to see it. So I haven't had one that's been able to... I just don't have one. I don't even bother to have a watch anymore, because any that I've got, they just collapse after about... Maybe it's the radiations from my screwball existence or something. Anyway, they don't work. Well, I'm glad we had that book on Athos in the refectory. But you should really pray for Mount Athos for those people. It would be a real pity if they ceased to exist. And obviously they're not about to start any adjournamento of any kind whatever. Well, he made that statement that the Russians were involved. Oh, they are now. There are a few are allowed, but very few. Oh, yeah, this is only recently it's within the last year they are allowing a few Russians in, but that's not going to help. Yeah. Yeah, and it's gone down. Yeah, but I mean, they've just gone down steadily since then. They haven't changed at all. They just kept right on the same way. The same people who go there, I mean, you follow these books carefully on Athos, and there's one old guy. He's the doorkeeper at Kutlamusi or someplace like that, and you just see him, and book after book after book, he gets more and more decrepit. It's the same fellow. And the buildings get more and more decrepit and so forth. It's a shame. I don't know what's going to happen to it. They'll probably what'll probably happen is they'll probably turn it into some kind of a tourist resort or something. A few semi-monks running it or something. I don't know. It'd be a shame if they did. I don't think this book mentioned there was one fantastic guy there. I think he's probably dead now, but he's always been one of my secret heroes. At this Carulia place, see, where they have the hermitages, there's actually one that's purely and simply a cave. There's several that are purely simply caves without anything built on the front. And there was one man living there. He lived in one of those caves. He entered there about the time of the Russian Revolution. He was an officer in the Russian army of the Tsarist army. And he was a very famous man. He was one of the few hermits out there that spoke English. And he was a very famous, terrific guy that lived in a cave there for something like, from World War I until recently. I think he died in the last few years. I forget what his name was, but he was a very well-known person on Athos. But anyway, it's very interesting. Well, that was and see, the thing about that, too, is that they had all this variety. I mean, I think that one of the best things we could do in America would be to try to get a sort of an island someplace and then have everything under the sun going on at the same time. So you have hermits and real active guys and real contemplative guys and real liturgical guys and totally non-liturgical guys. So then you get some sense of of the possibilities. See, because there are many possibilities. In my father's house there are many mansions. That should be the basic motto of the monastic life. Well, we're working on this. Really, what we're talking about is this sort of idea, sort of mixing up a little bit of Muslim mysticism and some modern psychoanalysis and a little bit of Martin Buber and a few things like that, really shaking it all up. And talking about the complete development of the inner man, the Christian person, and so forth. And the mystical life, the contemplative life, and how to make sense out of it. I'll start with a thing from Buber that I think is extremely deep. And it may not necessarily seem that way to you at first, but we'll maybe talk about it a little bit. What was Adam's real sin? Answer: Adam's real sin was that he worried about the morrow. Okay, but there's much more packed into it than that. See, this is just the beginning. The serpent set out to reason with him, saying, there is no service you can perform, for you cannot distinguish between good and evil and are unable to make a choice. Eat of this fruit, and you will be able to distinguish. You will choose the good and receive a reward. That he gave ear to this, that is where Adam was at fault. He worried that he would not be able to serve, yet at that very hour he had his service, to obey God and to resist the serpent. See? Now, as I say, that is extremely profound. I don't know how to begin to explain how profound it really is, but it is in various of these different kinds of traditions. You find the same sort of thing in the Buddhist tradition. You find the same sort of thing in Islam, and you find it in St. Bernard. And it is very deep in us, see. I mean, probably the reason why this does not strike us right away as important is that we are so totally infected with this particular attitude, see, that we can't see how there's anything wrong with that. I mean, you know. But this, putting it in the simplest possible terms, this is very close to St. Bernard. What's the pitch? What's he saying? What was Adam's sin according to this thing? Anybody? Yeah? No. See, that's you're miles away from it. With all due respect, yeah. He wanted to do good. See, now look, that is a fantastic statement. See, original sin was that Adam wanted to do good. Now, what about that? Don't lynch me. See, what about original sin was that the devil came to Adam and said, "Listen, kid, I'll show you how to do good." Now, believe me, that is think about that for a while, man, because there's a lot packed into that thing. Just, take that and mull that over. Now, what's wrong with doing good? How come that's sinful, yeah? Well, that certainly is involved here, see. That certainly is involved. There is definitely... see, Adam was doing good already, see. But now, all right, now what is now we're getting close. What is wrong there? Yeah? Yes, but I mean, there's a special Hasidic slant here, see, which is very subtle and very good. Yeah? Yeah, he's already doing good, see. He's doing good, he's not, and the devil says, don't be content with the good you're doing, but what's the added pitch? In what way? Well, he didn't really know. That's the point. See, that's where see, there's where you're on the pitch, yeah? He wanted to be able to good God. He didn't want to be purely accepted from God. Well, that's part of the thing. That's part of it. But what's the real? That's one aspect of it. What is the real pitch? Yeah. Well, he got worried. Definitely, that's where they first start. But he was worried because he couldn't see himself doing good. And the devil says, listen, see, what you need is to be able to do good and know it, see. And therefore, and if you once learn how to be doing good and knowing it, you're going to have a most interesting life, see. Because at all times you can watch yourself telling whether you're doing good or bad. And you're going to have a lot of thinking to do, and you're going to make a lot of decisions. See? Now, this is going to improve your personality considerably. See? Now, this is a very, I would say that there's a great deal packed into this. See? And this leads us into a similar temptation, which messes, I mean, it's obviously, this is one of the main problems with this life, you know. Day in and day out, we are in a complete mess if we want to do this, see. If we make this life a consistent project in seeing ourselves doing good, we are in trouble. See? And one of the ways in which people get in the most possible kind of trouble around here is precisely that, see. is wanting to see themselves doing good. Not just being content to do the good that one, if you just go along, you're bound to do some good, see. But this obsession with seeing yourself do good, see. And of course, now this is a very subtle thing. Some people will say, well, shouldn't we make progress? Yes, we should make progress. But the great point is, how do you make progress? You don't make progress by watching yourself make progress. That's how you don't make progress. See? Now this applies even more. This is the great problem that arises from, now there's a theological question. Is it legitimate for a person to desire mystical contemplation and so forth? See? Yes, it is legitimate for a person to desire mystical contemplation with a pure intention. See? Well, that's all very nice. You put this down on a piece of paper and you hand it in for an examination and you get A for your answer. See? And it does you no good whatever. Because what really happens, and I doubt if there's a person in this room who wouldn't be in this room if you had not at some moment or other thought, wouldn't it be nice if I were getting all this so-called mystical contemplation? See, wouldn't it be great if that's what was happening? See, and why isn't it happening? And let's get busy with the thing. Now, the problem that arises out of that is considerable. See, because what happens, it's just like this thing here. See, because what we are really saying there, I mean, you take the form of words and you can put it in a form of words that's impeccable. See. And you can add on pure intention and all the other, you learn the gimmicks real fast. And you can add every one of them on and make the thing perfect and be completely off beam with the thing. Because what it really adds up to is this, see. Point one, I look into my own heart and I see a mess, see, with which I am not happy. See. Now this is life. This happens to everybody. This is the way we are. This is inseparable from life. This just means I'm a living being, see. I look into myself and I see contradiction. And I see trouble, and I am not at peace totally with myself, except various moments like immediately after dinner and times like that. But most of the time, I look into myself and see conflict, contradiction, problems, and so forth and so on. And I say to myself, I would like to look into myself and see a totally different landscape. See, I would like to look into myself and see a landscape with which I am pleased. See, and the way to do this would be for me to be a mystic, because if I were a mystic, I would look into myself and turn on the switch, and on my TV would appear God. See, and this would be immensely consoling, and I would be able to do this when I wanted, because I would be a mystic. See? And this would take away all my troubles, and from this point on I would live content with myself. See? And I would almost be virtuous with other people too, if necessity demanded, if I were forced to. So this makes the whole project absolutely impossible. See? Because when you think like that, it's impossible for you to be what you want to be. The thing is self-defeating. See? Therefore, in all these traditions, the thing that everybody says and everybody knows and everybody makes very clear is that the self that wants to do this is putting itself in a position where it is bound to be self-defeating. See? And therefore, to do it is to increase your conflict, your contradiction, your suffering, your hatred of yourself, all this stuff, see. Now, of course, this is part of the normal thing, see. People who are pig-headed enough with it do this, see, and can increase all this, and then they learn from this. They get so sick of this, of beating their heads against this particular wall, that they finally stop, see. Now, the guys who don't stop, you know what happens to them. But the thing that has to happen in all this is exactly the opposite, see, is that this self that we wish to get rid of and so forth, we can't get rid of ourselves by ourselves. the whole thing is an entirely different approach. And the best thing to do if you want to make this kind of a step into a different realm of being is to forget about it altogether, see, and not think about it, and in a certain sense not desire it, see. That's why really it's a good rule of thumb to give them the old pitch, say, shut up, forget about being a mystic. And then if you will go and just, sweep the floor or do whatever you're going to do. But of course that gets to be a routine answer, which is very, very deadening too, because then, see, if this becomes automatic, then you sort of get the impression that it's just out of the question anyway, see, and it's not what the life is for, but it is what the life is for. And so you've got it's somewhere in between the two. It's not the business, see, that I've got to make it in 3 years and have business with my life. And it's not just saying, oh, forget about it altogether. There is a way, but you've got to find the right way. See? And the great thing is knowing the way. Well, the way to any kind of growth, any kind of psychological growth, whether it's in this deep spiritual way or just a question of attaining complete personal integration, is pretty much the same kind of thing. So therefore, when I talk about this in terms of just more ordinary psychological integration, it is useful for the other thing too, see, because it is a question of self-transcendence and breaking through into a different realm by working through into it. Now, the first thing that we have to remember about that is that instead, see, one of the dangerous things, one of the worst things about this business of looking into ourselves and wanting to find something there that's pleasing and wanting this to be achieved by sort of decorating ourselves with all kinds of virtues that we can contemplate, with all sorts of consolations and experiences of God and that kind of thing, see. The trouble with this is that it makes it very possible for us to evade the work that we have to do. The great thing that we have to do, instead of all this desiring and tinkering with intentions and fiddling with what goes on inside there, see, which is what we absolutely waste, is a waste of time. See? And this is not discipline, this is not contemplation, it's got nothing to do with it. What we have to do, on the contrary, is to work very hard to work through something that we have fairly recently found out. See? Because what we do is we neglect to work through the truth that we know. Instead of working through something, you get a bright idea. You're going along and you get a great, you get one of these good normal lights that come along and you see the whole thing kind of clear for a moment, see. And you see that you get a new perspective and you see a new stretch of road ahead and that sort of thing. Well, this is very satisfying and it's pleasant and so forth, and we think that when we've seen something like that, that's it, see. But when you see it, that means you've got to travel it. And we don't do that, see. Well, just the fact of having seen it is great. See, and we run to our confessor and say, gee, you know what I saw? And he says, gee, that's you're fine, you're making progress, you're in the unitive way now, see, pat you on the back, and so forth and so forth, see. Well, if you're in the unitive way, get down, get busy, and do the work that belongs to the unitive way. If you are in the unitive way, it means to say you've got a new job, see, and you better buckle down and start doing it, because it's a long one, see. It's a life work. But this is the trouble, we neglect to do this. And instead of doing the work, instead of working through something that we really have sort of got hold of, for the first time just a little bit, we transfer over into the daydream bit, see? And we daydream about the things that we would like to have, and the other things that we would like to see, see? This was a nice view. Now, let me daydream a little while about another nice view that I would like to have, and sort of ask for it, and so forth and so forth. There's no harm in asking. But it isn't that kind of a thing, see? It's much more humdrum kind of work. It does involve working through the sort of, just working through what things that we have recently found out, see? Everybody finds out simple, ordinary things that kind of come through, and he sort of gets a grasp on them or something. It's not so much what you read in a book, although that has something to do with it, Very often you find out something just by making a mistake. See, you make a real good mistake once in a while, and then you learn something. See, you learn from this. You get a kind of a new glimpse of the way things really are with you, and then you find you have something to work on, and you work through this. Now, when I say working through, do you understand what I mean by that? I mean this interior working through. Not so, it may be some exterior thing you have to do, but the working through that I'm talking about is really deepening one's experience of this truth, and deepening one's grasp of this truth, and one's understanding of it from different angles, see. And that means to say, several things are involved in this. One of them means exposure to new possibilities which have been opened up by this kind of thing. See, unexpected possibilities that the work that's involved with a lot of this is just simply meeting a new possibility head on, see, and suffering the shock, maybe, see, of its newness, and just being hit by it for a while, and so and going on like that. But one of the reasons why we neglect this, see, is that we don't realize how good it is, and we don't realize the greatness of it. So now let me give another Buber Hasidic story here to kind of illustrate this. See, this is to illustrate the truth that when you just grasp onto some simple thing, which is the thing that you need to work with now, you are really doing everything that you need to do now. See. And you do not have to stop and ask, how am I going to serve God better, or how am I going to have better experience, and so forth. The secret of the unity of God is, of course, this is not a metaphysical statement now, this is completely practical. The Hasidim make no metaphysical statements. No matter where I take hold of a shred of it, the unity of God, I hold the whole of it. Now, when he says taking hold of a shred of the unity of God, which is complete screwball philosophy, as a purely metaphorical kind of statement, he means what I was just saying about grabbing onto something that you need to do. See, doing a little bit of the job that you need to do. See, just simply deepening one little bit of a thing that has come to you, and you know that this is what you have to deepen. If you grasp that, you grasp everything. At that moment, you have God, well, you have the whole package, so to speak, although God is no package, but it is all there. He is all there. Yes? Well, you're back in... No, you don't want to see it, see. All you have to do is what I'm saying now is, don't try to see that it's the whole thing, but believe that it is. See, but here's what, because underlying all this is faith, see. The attitude of faith, which underlies all this, is a much more practical thing than just believing that God is three persons and one nature and that sort of thing. It is believing, too, that if I do the thing that I have to do now, everything else is taken care of, see? And I don't have to, and I'm believing that I don't have to see. See, there's this sort of a dialectic of believing and seeing is going on all the time. I mean, you realize that you don't have to see. And when you realize that you don't have to see, you see. See? Realizing that you don't have to see is seeing in the realm of faith. And it can become very clear seeing. A deep awareness and conviction of the fact that you don't need to see can be a very clear form of sight. And this is of the nature of a high kind of grace. See, but as soon as you reflect on it, see, these things you must not reflect on, because we're not made to reflect on those on things like that. It's not the way we're constructed. If I take hold of a shred of it, I hold the whole of it. And since the teachings and all the commandments are radiations of his being, he who lovingly does one commandment utterly and to the core, and in this one commandment takes hold of the shred of the unity of God, holds the whole of it in his hand and has fulfilled all. See? Now that fits in very nicely with the other. In other words, but of course, this is the Christian, there's an old Christian adage, which is just age quod ages, go ahead and do what you're doing. See? But with the realization of the depth and the dimension of what you're doing. But this realization has to be from faith, see. And all this, see, sort of centers around not at all a question of seeing myself have new experiences and so forth, but a question of real growth. See, this is the way we really grow. And the thing that we have to do is grow. Because this is an imperative obligation in the spiritual life. See? This is the great demand. Now, I'll come back to another one of these in a minute. But you see, when something new opens up like that, it is a new self that opens up, if it's significant enough. See, it is a new level of being opens up to us, which has to be accepted, and the acceptance means work. See, it is not enough to accept up here. You have to accept in practice by doing the work that the acceptance implies, whatever it is in each particular case. It may mean sacrificing something that you realize now you no longer need. See, and I don't mean by that some material thing. I mean much more some interior attitude. See, it's more. This is again a very important business of working through things. This working through is to a great extent a matter of abandoning interior attitudes, abandoning ways of thinking that you don't need anymore. See, abandoning. You no longer have to spend time thinking about certain aspects of the spiritual life, something like that, or thinking about certain problems that you're finished with. See, that's another way in which we don't work through these jobs that we need to work through. We cling to problems that are no longer significant in our lives. This is a great way to stay fixed in nothing. See, is to cling to problems that we really lived through years ago. See, but we still think we have to solve them. This is again a thing that we need to learn. See how to slough these things off and move on to the next thing. But if we do not work through these things, we enter a real acute conflict. And of course that's healthy too, that's a good thing. See? But acute conflict can arise where there is a perception of a new opening up without any corresponding work. See? This is one of the great sources of painful conflict in our life here. Now look, don't let me associate this with guilt. See, conflict is good, and painful conflict is good. And it's like having a limb hurting when it's sick and has to have something done to it. See, it is good to feel this kind of thing, but the trouble is we don't know how to identify this, and we identify it wrong. And as I say, we backtrack into some old problem. We start hurting somewhere, and we think that it is the problem that used to hurt us before. Then we go back into that, and then we don't realize why we're sort of stuck. See, but really, very often we open up to a new state of being, and we don't take the necessary step to move into it. We don't do the necessary work to move into it, and then we are in trouble and conflict and anguish and so forth, and we don't know why. Okay. And it would be very nice if we had somebody to tell us why, but we don't. That's one of the big problems. That we don't. It would be very nice if there were more people around who could give you a push at the right time in these particular things. That is one of the things that we most need in the monastic life. See, people who have some experience of this and who can give you the right push at the right time and save you from hurting unnecessarily for 6 months when you could do it in a day, maybe. See, this would be very nice, but we don't happen to have that many people like that around. So, okay, you got to sweat it through yourself. The traditional formula around here is you sweat your own darn blood yourself. See. And somebody around every once in a while will mop a little bit of it up and console you for a while. But most of the time it's a do-it-yourself project with a nice, warm community functioning all around you, and they're all sweating blood too, but nobody can help them. See? But really, you have to. What I hope is that if you can sort of get a grasp of these particular things, it'll help you to do it yourself more easily. See, you won't be disconcerted by the blood, and you won't feel that you're not getting somewhere when you start hurting. That's just when you are getting somewhere. But to have to realize yourself when a little heat wouldn't hurt. See, when it wouldn't hurt to put on a little steam, because that again is one of the things that holds us back. See, We don't know when to push ourselves. And in a certain sense, we've kind of lost the courage to push. See, we're afraid to, gee, if I give a little push, maybe it'll be maybe it's all wrong. Maybe it'll be a mistake. Well, try and see what happens. See? And of course, if you find yourself that every time you give a push, you end up with a broken head or something, well, sooner or later somebody's going to tell you, put a pillow there or something. But nevertheless, you have to have the courage to give a little push once in a while, see, and see what happens, and see where it leads, and so forth. If you don't, see, supposing one of the things that happens, supposing you get one of these openings and you finally diddle around and then miss it, then what happens is you retire into a kind of deadness and stagnation and confusion and so forth, which may last years, see. And this, too, is very unpleasant, and we've all gone through this, see, of the business of being, it's as though your head had turned on or something. I mean, you can't think, you can't, you're just blah, see. And this goes on for a long time. You can't pray, you cannot do reading, and of course this isn't bad either. This is sometimes necessary. Sometimes you have to go through this. See, sometimes it's important to go through 3 or 4 years of total stupidity. See? This can be important for a person. Yeah? Well, yeah, there generally is, but I mean, you might have saved yourself all this if you just given a little push at the right time. But who knows? See? Well, there is a kairos in the spiritual life. No. There is such a thing as a kind of a kairos in which all the things come together. See, and when you're playing those slot machines, with the 3 bell fruits coming down, I mean, you've never seen those. Well, now let me explain to you that in the spiritual life that I used to lead before I entered the monastery, you used to consult these oracles. See, and you went up to this big sort of a sculptured oracle, and it had in it there was a handle on it. See, and you put nickels, dimes, and quarters into this thing, and you pull the handle. And then all these omens, you get lemons and you get oranges and all these fruits and stuff like that. And if you were real lucky, you got 3 bells all in a row. See, and when the 3 bells were all in a row, you had to get a wheelbarrow to carry away home. Okay, well now that's like the kairos of the spiritual life. See, I mean, very often things come together, but they don't all come together that good. See, but there is always something good, and there's always something happens. But there are certain moments in the spiritual life where everything coincides in such a way, and we've known this. Everybody has known this. See, there are times when all of a sudden it all just pans out, and then if you miss that one, well, really, you've missed. See. I mean, if you get the 3 bells and then it all comes falling out, you don't pick it up. Yeah.
Well, one sense that you have to have a experience break.
Well,
take out these pitfalls.
Well, there are really. There aren't. I mean, there aren't. I would say one of the things what we lack is people who will really give you the kind of constructive pushing that we need. But there are always enough around to keep you from making the bigger mistakes. See, the kind of experience, we've got the kind of experienced directors who can spot you if you're going to do something really crazy, and tell you, because they know that. We've got no lack of that, and thank God that's what you can certainly trust them. Because the people around here will certainly tell you they've got enough experience of all the nonsense that people get into around here. If they see you getting into it, they'll tell you. But most of them haven't got the gumption to give you that push, see, and to push you along hard enough in the right way at the right time and so forth. They may push you, but it may be a kind of a routine pushing, they push you like a wheelbarrow or something. It's every week a push, yeah. You find out. Well, really, we learn a lot by our mistakes, see. Our mistakes can be, one of the things that we have to do is to learn the value, learn how to interpret our mistakes, because our mistakes tell us things, see. And if we really learn from our mistakes, we're getting some pretty good direction from the Holy Spirit, you know. But it's kind of hard to do that. But I think if a person gets enough experience, he sooner or later finds out. Now, here's one other Hasidic story about the way. What way should I take? See, all this is sort of circling around the same thing. It is impossible to tell men what way they should take. For one way to serve God is by the teachings. Another, there's a Desert Father story is exactly like this. It says the same thing. One way to serve God is by the teachings, another by prayer, another way by fasting, and still another by eating. Everyone should carefully observe which way his heart draws him, and then choose that way with all his strength. See? But what we do is that we observe which way our heart draws us, and then we sit down and say, oh, my heart draws me. See? And what a lovely little heart I've got, you know. Well, that's the way your heart draws you. Auditorium also $100.